Henri G. Busignies was whisked from his Paris home in the middle of the night and smuggled into the back of a truck. The streets were alive with danger. Nazi patrols were posted at every corner, and roadblocks checked all vehicles leaving the city. Each jolt of the truck sent his heart racing as he clung tightly to his prototype specialized radio devices. Busignies' employers at the American ITT Corporation knew the stakes. His research on direction finding was a weapon the Allies desperately needed, and they were prepared to gamble everything to extract him. When they arrived in Lyon, a clandestine meeting took place to decide how to extract the French researcher. With France falling and Italy firmly in the Axis camp, escape routes from Europe were closing fast, leaving only slim, risky options. A massive undercover journey took Busignies, smuggled inside a fishing boat, to Algiers, Rabat, Tangier, and finally back to Europe, to Lisbon, Portugal, where he and other top French researchers were hurried into a cargo ship bound for the United States. When Busignies finally arrived on American soil, the U.S. military wasted no time, pressing him to unveil the secrets he carried. He unveiled the prototypes in a locked room surrounded by Army officers. This man held the technology to finally end the U-boat Wolfpack's reign of terror in the Pacific and possibly shift the tides of the entire war. Despite working by themselves with next to zero communications, U-boats had proven their lethality during World War I by sinking over 12 million tons of Allied shipping. By the 1930s, Karl Dönitz was certain that their success could be compiled tenfold if there was just a way for U-boats to communicate effectively and operate as groups. By the late 1930s, the drastic and almost sudden improvement of radio technology made his dream a chilling reality. The Wolfpacks were coming. The key to their success was radio communication. U-boats, scattered across the vast Atlantic, used shortwave radios to report sightings and receive orders. Their messages were brutally efficient, often just a few seconds long. Encoded with the seemingly unbreakable Enigma machine, these transmissions allowed them to speak freely, even under the nose of Allied intelligence. The process was simple but effective. A lone U-boat would find a convoy, report its position, and wait. More submarines would arrive within hours, forming a tight noose around the hapless merchant ships. At the time, the Allies had rudimentary direction-finding tech to track enemy radio signals. However, it was painfully slow. Operators had to manually adjust massive antennas, aligning them with the direction of an incoming signal. Triangulation to determine a precise location required multiple stations to pick up the same transmission, which was impossible if the signal lasted only seconds. This tactic tore through Allied supply lines during what German sailors called the happy time. In 1940 and early 1941, U-boats prowled the North Atlantic like sharks in a feeding frenzy. The numbers were staggering. In October 1940 alone, over 350,000 tons of Allied shipping went to the bottom. Ships sank faster than Britain could replace them, and the Atlantic became a graveyard for merchant crews. Convoy SC-7 was a textbook example of the Wolfpack's devastating power. It left Sydney, Nova Scotia, with 35 ships. 7 U-boats caught its scent. Over 5 days in October 1940, they tore it apart, sinking 20 ships and over 79,000 tons of cargo. The convoy escorts were overwhelmed, and the losses were catastrophic. It wasn't just the cargo that mattered. It was the message. The Atlantic was no longer safe. The U-boat captains knew the risk of using radio, yet by keeping transmissions short, hopping frequencies, and transmitting only when absolutely necessary, they reduced their chances of being located to almost zero. In those early days, the Wolfpack struck with near impunity. Every sinking ship felt like another nail in Britain's coffin. Winston Churchill himself put it bluntly, quote, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." Churchill understood that the Wolfpacks were an existential threat and would have to be stopped. But in 1940, no one had a clue how to do it. After his dramatic escape from Nazi-occupied France, Henri G. Busignies, not only as a lead researcher in high-frequency direction finding, but also with working prototypes that demonstrated that his findings were ready to be applied. The technology he developed was originally conceived in the 1920s to track atmospheric phenomena like lightning. Busignies, however, had a breakthrough when he realized that this technology could also be used to track radio transmissions, no matter how short. The HFDF, short for High Frequency Direction Finding System, was a breakthrough in radio interception technology. Unlike earlier systems that relied on slow, manual alignment of large directional antennas, HFDF introduced a faster, automated approach. It employed a fixed array of antennas paired with a cathode ray tube display, allowing operators to determine a radio signal's bearing almost instantaneously. The key was its ability to detect and analyze high-frequency signals, those above 2 MHz, which were often used by U-boats for their short, encoded transmissions. The fixed antennas picked up signals, and a goniometer processed them to pinpoint the direction of the transmission. The results appear as visual traces on the display, enabling operators to identify the signal source in mere seconds. This was a game-changer, especially against U-boats, whose survival depended on sending extremely brief radio messages to avoid detection. The prototypes Busignies brought with him were developed into fully functional, mass-produced models. By 1941, the first operational systems were installed on British destroyers and escort ships. Early versions, such as the FH-1 and FH-3, proved invaluable in convoy defense. By mid-1942, more advanced iterations, like the FH-4, were first installed at U.S. coastal bases. By mid-1944, the equipment was widely deployed across the U.S. Navy's fleet, including destroyers and escort carriers. Although the system couldn't immediately provide the exact location of a submarine, combining directional data from multiple HFDF-equipped stations or ships made triangulation fast and effective. For the first time, Allied forces could identify the general vicinity of a U-boat, giving convoy escorts critical intelligence to evade or hunt down the attackers. This integration marked a turning point in the war. HFDF gave the Allies the upper hand, enabling them to track wolfpacks in the vastness of the Atlantic. By the end of 1942, U-boat losses had increased dramatically, and the happy time for German submarines was over. U-boat captains had prowled the Atlantic with near impunity for years, confident in their ability to strike and vanish. Their wolfpack struck fear into Allied convoys, slipping away into the vastness of the ocean before retaliation could follow. But by 1942, U-boat commanders began to find themselves in a trap orchestrated by the Allies' newfound ability to track their fleeting radio transmissions. Convoy HX-239, sailing from New York to Liverpool in May 1943, faced the dreaded wolfpacks. 13 U-boats had assembled to destroy it, expecting another slaughter. But the Allies had equipped its escorts with HFDF. As the U-boats began their attack, the radio transmissions were intercepted. Within seconds, escort ships pinpointed the direction of the enemy. Armed with this intelligence, destroyers closed in, unleashing depth charges with pinpoint accuracy. The convoy lost only 2 ships, while 5 U-boats were sunk in just 48 hours. This scenario played out repeatedly as HFDF became a staple of Allied convoy defense. In March 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic reached its climax during the battle for convoy SC-118. The convoy was ambushed by a wolfpack of 19 U-boats in the mid-Atlantic, far from air cover. As U-boats transmitted their positions to coordinate the attack, their transmissions were intercepted. Destroyers surged toward the sources, forcing the submarines to break off their assault. The convoy sustained losses but delivered the majority of its cargo, while 4 U-boats were destroyed. U-boat commanders were bewildered. How could the Allies locate them in the vast expanse of the ocean? Karl Friedrich Merten, one of Germany's most successful U-boat commanders, later described the suffocating feeling of being hunted. Quote, "They came at us like wolves. No matter where we surfaced, there they were, waiting." The psychological toll on U-boat crews was immense. Captains, desperate to prevent Allied detection, began avoiding radio communication altogether, which crippled the wolfpack tactics that had once been their strength. The destruction of U-boat 641 off the Azores in July 1943 exemplified the new reality. After intercepting a transmission, an Allied destroyer squadron closed in with chilling precision. Forced to surface, The U-boat faced a barrage of gunfire that took the lives of most of its crew. Survivors described the attack as, quote, coming out of nowhere. The numbers told the story. In 1941, the Allies sank only 35 U-boats. By 1943, after Huff Duff was widely deployed, that figure had more than tripled, with 151 U-boats destroyed in the first half of the year alone. Convoy losses plummeted, and U-boat crews found themselves retreating into ever more limited hunting grounds. But Huff Duff's greatest contribution to the war effort was the capture of an intact German U-boat. On June 4, 1944, U-505, under the command of Captain Lieutenant Harold Long, was operating near the African coast, prowling for convoys. It made a fatal mistake, however, when it transmitted a routine message to its command. Unbeknownst to Long, USS Guadalcanal and her escort group, which included 5 destroyer escorts equipped with Huff Duff, intercepted the transmission. Within moments, Huff Duff triangulated the direction of the signal, narrowing U-505's location to a manageable search area. The task group, led by Captain Daniel V. Gallery, moved swiftly. Depth charges forced U-505 to the surface, its hull damaged and the crew disoriented. Unaware of how quickly the Allies had tracked him, Long ordered his crew to abandon ship, leaving scuttling charges behind. But the Allied boarding party acted with unprecedented speed, securing the submarine before it could sink. Capturing U-505 was monumental for the war effort. Inside its hull, the Allies found an intact Enigma machine, codebooks, and detailed charts of German naval operations. This intel allowed the Allies to anticipate U-boat movements and continue to dismantle the Wolfpack capabilities in the Atlantic, one piece at a time. More importantly, the operation proved Huff Duff's remarkable effectiveness. Without it, the task group would never have located U-505 in time. The system had shortened the search from days to mere hours, turning what might have been a chance encounter into a calculated interception. Alongside radar and the breaking of Enigma codes, Huff Duff had shifted the balance of power in the Atlantic. By the war's end, these 3 technologies worked in unison to systematically dismantle the U-boat threat. Huff Duff ensured U-boat transmissions, once the cornerstone of Wolfpack coordination, became their Achilles heel. Radar allowed surface ships and aircraft to locate submarines even under cover of darkness or poor weather. Enigma decryption allowed the Allies to anticipate attacks before they happened. Together, these technologies turned the vast Atlantic into a trap for the U-boats. By 1945, over 70% of Germany's U-boat fleet had been destroyed, and the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest and one of the most crucial campaigns of the war, ended in Allied victory.